Okay, welcome to the Brown Bag Speakers Forum. We're going to get started. We have a great lineup for next year. Our first speaker in January will be Deb Self, the Executive Director of Baykeeper, and she'll discuss the health of San Francisco Bay. And it's a local sort of health of the Bay right by Albany, and some issues that have come up legally, including Albany on the Bay. Okay, now we'll have Mary introduce Susan Moon, the speaker.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. What a really nice turnout this is. So Susan Moon, we're really happy to have her. Somebody walked by my office one day and handed me her book and said, "You should read this book." So I read it, and I thought, we should have her come and speak. This would be a great topic and a great speaker. So Susan Moon is a writer and a longtime Zen Buddhist who teaches popular workshops mostly in California, and she lives in Berkeley. She's the former editor of Turning Wheel, the Journal of Socially Engaged Buddhism. Some of her other books include The Life and Letters of Tofu Roshi, Not Turning Away, Being Bodies, and most recently, the book she's going to probably talk about today, is This Is Getting Old: Zen Thoughts on Aging with Humor and Dignity. Her books she has some books for sale, so if you'd like to have her sign a book and you can purchase it, you're more than welcome to do that. So please join me in welcoming Susan Moon.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for inviting me here. Excuse me? I'm very happy to be here. This is a great forum, this series. I've been to it myself as an audience member, and it's a wonderful thing for the community. So it's an honor to be here talking to you. And I am going to talk about my book, This Is Getting Old, and I'm going to talk about getting old. And I'll read a little bit from the book, but I thought I'd first talk about how I got interested in the subject and what made me think of writing the book. So as far as how I got interested in the subject, that just kind of happened by going to bed at night and getting up in the morning day after day, and lo and behold, it turned out I was getting older. All of us are familiar with the idea. It looks from the audience as though many of you might also think about getting old sometimes, and I don't see very many teenage faces in this audience here. So, but even young people have an interest in aging too. We're all doing it, no matter what age we are. Everybody's getting older. But when you're young, or at least when I was young, you don't identify with old people at all. You just think there's some other kind of species. And when you're 20, you think 30 is old. I mean, I remember, don't trust anybody over 30. They've sold out by that time, So each decade, you kind of advance by a decade what old is until you really can't do it anymore. And when I turned 60, I began to notice that I really was feeling some effects of aging. And, I had thought that I wanted to live a long time and have lots of birthdays, but I didn't really want to get old and frail in the process. And I thought if I took my vitamins and did my exercise, I wouldn't actually get old. At some part of my mind, there's some magical thinking about it, but then it did seem to be happening to me, and my joints got really stiff, and I have pretty bad arthritis in my knees. I'm about to get a double knee replacement in a couple of months. So that was one of the things, my knees, that first got me noticing that my body was impermanent. And then there's the memory, of course, and I had some visual problems, and I have osteoporosis, and everybody has their different ways that they notice the changes in the body. And so I thought, and I'm a writer, and I'm accustomed to dealing with the things that are happening to me and the things that concern me by really trying to explore them and not turn away from them. I'm also a Buddhist, and the Buddhist teaching is to not turn away from what's difficult, but to just look and see, what is this actually? What is it? If I really look at it, maybe it's not so bad. So I thought, sat down and thought, well, maybe I'll write a book about getting old, and I'll just write about all the scary things. And I made a list of all the scary things, like the things I just mentioned: memory loss, breaking your bones and falling down all the time. My balance wasn't that great, although it's gotten better with some practice. And then I kind of started to write, but I also noticed that as I wrote, there are very positive things about aging, which I hadn't really been paying attention to in the beginning. Excuse me? Am I at a good distance from the mic, by the way? Is this working? Okay, yeah. So, and I do want to acknowledge also that I just turned 70, so I never thought that would happen. 70, that's some other realm, but here I am, and yeah. All right, go. So what I want to say is that I really acknowledge that I'm actually a baby at getting old, and I don't really know the most difficult, challenging aspects of it, and I have tremendous respect and admiration for my elders. I really do, and I know I have a lot to learn yet as I go along, so I don't want anybody to think that I'm some young upstart thinking I know what the suffering of age is, because I know that, I've been very fortunate, and I'm basically pretty healthy, and I just want to be part of a conversation, and I want to continue to learn from people both older and younger than myself. So I feel very much as though I offer this book and I offer my thoughts as part of a wider conversation that we're all having in the culture and in the society, and it's happening more now, which is really a good change, I think, that, people are talking about what it's like to get old, and it's not so taboo or impolite to talk about it, maybe, or people aren't so inclined to think you have to just completely have a stiff upper lip. And I think it has to do partly with that I'm kind of part of a cohort or a generation of people who are constantly talking to each other. We're always talking to each other about what we're going through and writing books about it as we go along. But this is really good. I mean, I think it's good for us to share with each other, and we can support each other very much. And one of the things that I did as I entered my 60s, a friend of mine started what she called a Crohn's group, and 5 of us met once a month to talk about issues of aging and what was difficult for us, what was challenging for us, what we were learning. And we took turns each month. A different person led the meeting and brought up some interest or concern, and or we watched some films, and we talked also about how we could what we could offer to younger people as older people. It wasn't just a sort of to complain to each other, but what does it mean to be, how do we become not only older, but how do we become elders? And what is that about? And so that was a wonderful thing, which we met for about 5 years and stopped just because things have their own lifespan. But I completely encourage you, if you're not already in such a group, maybe do something like that. You can do it very informally with friends and really talk about issues like losing people you love when they die, or about living situations and what's an appropriate place to live as you get older, or what about relationships, difficult relationships with faraway grandchildren, or any kind of thing that comes up for you, to share with each other and let it be part of a conversation. So I think the book also is part of that feeling I had that I just want to share and share my own experience. So the book is actually divided into 3 parts, and the first part has essays. It has a number of essays or chapters, and each one is really about some experiences of my own that hopefully are of broader interest. So the first section is about changes in the body and mind, kind of physiological changes of aging, and I talk about my father's blindness, and I talk about uh, bones and arthritis and osteoporosis and not being able to hike anymore and things like that, and memory loss, some changes in memory. And then the middle section is about sort of social changes that I've noticed and how, as we get older, we have a different role in the society, and people treat us differently. We can become invisible, especially women. I think it happens to some degree to men too, but we really do become kind of invisible. And this could have some advantages as well as disadvantages. If you wanted to become a career shoplifter or something, maybe it would be good. But and then there's also a kind of another positive change I noticed as a social change is a feeling about old friends. I began to feel this incredible preciousness about old friends, friends who have been my friends for a long time, and old friends who are also chronologically old, but you can't have a friendship that's any older than you are. And if you have, there's something about friends from childhood or youth that becomes increasingly precious as you get old. And any kind of friend, a new friend, is also very, very precious and wonderful, and I treasure my new friends. But an old friend holds your past in his or her heart and memory too. So you kind of give each other your childhood back in a way, or share it together. And then I became a grandmother, and I wrote about that and the tremendous joys of that. And in a sense, even if you're not a grandparent, as we get older, we can kind of get a sense of being part of a leaf in the generation of leaves, of how the generations go on, but there's this sense of human continuity, and that we can see ourselves from a distance in a way, and just know that this is how it is. People are born and they get old and they die, and other people are born, and you can get a little bit more distance on your life in that way, and let go a little bit of your clinging to yourself, I think. And I'm sure I have a long way to go in that realm, but I do feel some peace and equanimity about being just part of a generation in a way that's passing. And trust, impermanence is one of the teachings of Buddhism, and that life is impermanent and everything is impermanent. And we can think of this as very painful because what we love dies, but it's also very beautiful because what we love is born. That's also an aspect of impermanence, birth, and everything keeps changing. And so accepting that impermanence and accepting the beauty of impermanence has been part of my Buddhist practice, and also my writing practice, and also my aging practice, I would say. And another thing about writing the book is that I find that as a writer, I find that when I allow myself to show my vulnerability, this is helpful to people. I also am a Buddhist teacher, and in teaching, this is also true, that if you can just show that you're a person with your own fears and difficulties and sorrows, people are relieved to know that they aren't alone. And this is one of the biggest things about sharing these things, is that we aren't alone. And so even if what you're feeling is tremendous loneliness, and I write about loneliness as well in the book, at some level you aren't alone in your loneliness, and you can be comforted by that. Other people have been and are right now feeling what you're feeling, and you can feel some sharing of that. I think I'll read one of the essays, which is from the first section, and it's the first essay in the book, and it's called "Where Did I Put My Begging Bowl?" and it's about memory loss, which is certainly probably the most frequently complained about difficulty of aging. And, it's easier to complain. I mean, even young people complain about their memory loss. So, where did I put my begging bowl? The other day, as I was filling out a form, I couldn't remember my Social Security number. I made a running start at it several times, but I couldn't get past 013. I had to look it up on last year's income tax form. To reassure myself, I recited the books of the Old Testament in order without a pause. I can do it, too. My great-aunt paid me $2 to learn them when I was 10, and they've stayed in my head for over 50 years. She said it would come in handy to know them by heart, and so it did, though not in the way she had expected. Of course, memory loss is a normal part of aging. I bet Buddha sometimes forgot where he put his bowl down in his later years. But normal or not, it's inconvenient, even disabling. More than once, I've had to enlist a friend to walk the streets with me looking for where I parked my car. My mind, like my bladder, is shrinking with age so that it doesn't hold as much at once. I now put people in my Rolodex by their first names if I think I'm going to forget their last. This will only work as long as I can remember the alphabet. Forgetfulness eats away at people's names, starting at the end, so that sometimes I find myself clinging to the first letter of the first name, like a person at sea hanging onto a splintered piece of the mast. My mother went through a period of time when she said she couldn't remember ordinary words. I'll just interrupt here to say that my mother was a tremendous influence on me also in writing this book. She had been interested in aging, and she thought she might write about it. She was a poet, and she had a whole bunch of books about aging, and she was just 20 years older than me, which isn't, she was young when I was born, so she wasn't that far ahead of me down the road, and I was kind of watching her and watching her age, and she was a wonderful woman. I really was lucky to have her for a mother, and we were very close. But so the book is kind of, well, it's dedicated to her and to my granddaughter. At the other end, speaking of being in the generation of leaves, I feel myself kind of sandwiched between these different generations, and it struck me that this is a long interruption, but you won't mind. It struck me that I had never known my mother when she was a little girl, which my granddaughter is, and I will never know my granddaughter when she's an old lady. And I'm in between knowing myself as both a little girl and an old lady, but somehow it was very wonderful to me that I'm in this chain of people. So a little homage to my mother there. So anyway, she went through a period of time when she said she couldn't remember ordinary words. She began writing them down, after she did remember them, in a little notebook that she carried around with her. Catalog, vascular, pollen. She thought she might be able to look them up when she needed them. Now it happens to me too. I know there's a good word for the thing I want to say, and I can't get hold of it. If someone else says it, I know what it means, but I can't seem to get it on the hook and reel it in, to put it in my, what do you call those wicker baskets that fishermen use? When I had a particularly bad spate of memory problems a couple of years ago, I got scared. I went to see a psychologist about my cognitive functioning. He was over 60 himself, and first we reminisced about the 60s, which helped to put me at my ease. Then he had me repeat strings of numbers and words, forwards and backwards. "You did very well," he told me, "for your age." This was reassuring, though "for your age" has a sad ring to it. The visit helped me to accept that some memory loss is normal. It's what's happening. I have a different brain now, and as long as I'm grasping for the mind that I had 20 years ago, I suffer. Then, too, there's the remembering. I may not remember the last names of lots of people I know, but I remember seeing my father standing in the doorway of our apartment in Chicago, looking like a stranger in his brown army uniform and hat, silhouetted against the light from outside. I must have been about 2.5, and he was going off to the war in the Pacific. The older you are, the more of your life is in the past, and the more historical your memories become. It's part of the job description of an older person to tell stories about the times that are gone, about what it's like to have your father disappear into a war, for example, or about stepping off the Greyhound bus in Biloxi, Mississippi, 50 years ago to work on voter registration and being greeted by the sheriff saying, "Now don't you be causing any trouble in our town, young lady." History's not what really happened. There's no such thing. It's what people remember and tell each other. But it is good if you don't go on too long. Sometimes I tell a story more than once, forgetting that I've told it before, especially, it seems, when I'm talking to my children. I try to remember to say, "Stop me if I've already told you this," because I know from listening to my own mother how annoying it is to sit through a story you've heard before, pretending to be surprised at the punchline. Well, actually, it's only annoying if you remember the story. And this is a good reason why old folks should hang out together. When I tell my old friend Bill a story for the second time, it doesn't matter because he's completely forgotten the story. This is called beginner's mind. Memory is plastic, whatever age you are. What I remember isn't necessarily what happened, and how I remember it changes depending on my changing focus of attention. Sometimes, driving along one of my familiar routes, I suddenly can't remember where I'm going. Then I'm in a dark place, even in broad daylight. I keep driving, slowly hoping I'll remember where I'm going before I get there. So far, I always have. Zen master Dogen, my favorite Zen master, famously wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by the 10,000 things." What does he mean by forgetting the self? Could forgetting my social security number or where I parked my car be steps in the right direction? If I lose my memory, will I stop being me, or is there a me beneath the memory? Is there a look in my eye that will stay no matter what I forget? I believe that Dogen is talking about forgetting self-concern, and as I grow older, I notice what an excellent time it is to practice this kind of forgetting. It's all about letting go. I can forget about accomplishing all my ambitions. It's too late for that. Sometimes, for a moment, I taste the relief of letting this self fold gently into the next self, moment by moment, like eggs into batter. It's time to forget some things and remember others. As a matter of fact, the planet needs all of us human beings to remember our history and to remember our own accountability in it. History is a process that we keep on making out of the stories we tell each other about the past. These days, if you forget the books of the Old Testament, you can look them up on the internet. But there are still some things that the internet can't remember for you, like where you parked the car, and the stories of your life. How it was, for example, to be sitting in bed nursing your newborn baby when you learned on the TV news of Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. Oh, by the way, it's creel, that wicker basket for fish. So, thank you. So I just wanted to say a few more things, and I want to have time for for a discussion. So I really did notice and do notice that as I get older, there's a change in my sense of time. And it's kind of ironic because as we get older, time seems to go faster and faster. I'm sure you experience that too. And also we assume that there's less and less time in front of us. We don't know how much time is left, but it's probably getting, it is getting shorter and shorter. And so there's less and less and less and less time all the time. And yet, it's also an opportunity to be really 100% present in the present moment. And in the present moment, we have all the time in the world. If we're in the present moment, we're completely present. And somehow, it's become easier for me to inhabit the present moment as an old person. So even as aging is kind of robbing me of linear time, you could say, it's giving me a kind of deep time that I can live more fully. And I'm grateful for that. And it kind of goes along with the idea that as we get older, maybe it becomes more and more difficult to travel and go places, but we have more opportunity to journey within when we can no longer journey without. We can still make our journey. And also I think we have a chance to let go of what's not important to us and to really stop doing things that we just do to be nice, and we get a little more license and a little more permission to just say, no, I don't have time for that now. So another important part of getting older, I think, that has come to me lately, partly my granddaughter has helped me with this, is that I realize that we really have a job of modeling what it is to be old. And we are responsible not just to ourselves. Our lives don't belong to us alone. They belong to all the people who love us and all our friends. And that doesn't mean we have to live forever for their benefit, because we can't do that. But it means that we have a kind of responsibility to take care of ourselves for their sake, and as best we can. And also for young people I would like to model being old as a celebration of life, a different stage of life. I don't want my granddaughter to learn from me that it's a miserable thing to be old and to dread it in her own life. So if you ask yourself, what do you want young people to see in you? Because they're going to get old too. And how can we, even in the midst of terrible infirmity, what can you model and what can you put forth that's kind of loving and creative? And this is also not to say, pretend everything's fine. It's not that at all, because we also have a responsibility to speak what's true for us and to speak our experience and to ask for help when we need it. But I think there's a balance of asking for help when we need it and not keeping a stiff upper lip and pretending something's different from how it is, and at the same time finding the joy in each moment that we can, and adapting and not holding on to what we have to let go of because we can't do it anymore. If you can't play tennis anymore, and you loved playing tennis and that's a terrible loss, well, then adapt in a different way. Find something else you can do, and play shuffleboard. And then if you can't play shuffleboard anymore because you can't walk, then take up jigsaw puzzles. Just keep going with the flow, and there's so many ways of manifesting as a person in this world, and all of us in this room are, we're so fortunate that we're able to have choices to come to a place like this and read books, and so we have many ways of really being fully present and fully alive. And if we just stop, like right this second, how amazing it is that right here at this moment, 1:02 p.m., here is this group of people in this room together, breathing together, knitting together, listening together, smiling together. What a great moment. So here we are. And then the next moment and the next moment. So that's been helpful to me too, to just think about making an offering, trying to offer myself in some way and not just worry about my own self and as an isolated being, but to remember how I'm so connected to everything else. And hope that I can move gracefully into the next stage, and hope that I'm not too scared of dying when I die, But to keep being present. And I think if you take care of the present, you can take care of the future a lot that way. So maybe I will Well, actually, maybe I'll read a really short one, because we still have quite a bit of time. This is the last one in the book. I'll read part of it, and it's called This Vast Life. Every morning, I vow to be grateful for the precious gift of human birth. It's a big gift, and it includes a lot of stuff I never particularly wanted for my birthday. Some of the things in the package I wish I could exchange for a different size or color. But I want to find out what it means to be a human being. My curiosity remains intense, even as I get older. So I say thanks for the whole thing. It's all of a piece. When my granddaughter was just over 2, I visited her and her parents in Texas. She doesn't have a lot of ideas yet about how things are supposed to be or what's supposed to happen next. She's glad to be alive. I was babysitting for her one afternoon, and part of my job was to get her up from her nap. I was reading in the next room, and I knew when she woke up because I heard her chatting away to her bear. I lifted her and her bear out of her crib, and we went downstairs. While I fixed her a snack of crackers and cheese, she danced around a purple ball that was lying in the middle of the living room, singing an old nursery rhyme that she had learned in her preschool. Ring around the rosies, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. And then she sat down on the floor, kerplunk, laughing. She was fully present, fully joyful. Actually, the song she was singing is a very old chant about the plague, and the last line about the ashes refers to our mortality. But she wasn't worrying about that. It happened only a few days after visiting my granddaughter that I visited an old friend in his 80s who lives in an assisted living facility. He's a Catholic priest and monk who has dedicated his life to solitude and spiritual study. He's well read in multiple spiritual traditions, including Zen, and he is an important mentor to me. He's not well physically. He's weak, on oxygen, and confined to a wheelchair, but his mind is fine. He told me, "If I've died before, I don't remember it, but I recognize what's happening. That's where I'm going." Years ago, he had a coffin built for himself by a carpenter he knows. It stands upright in his tiny apartment, like a roommate, a reminder, keeping him company. He sits at his table and looks out the window at a pear tree and watches its leaves turn and fall and bud again. He watches the seasons, the whole universe in that pear tree. He reads, he prays, he receives an occasional visitor. Like my granddaughter, he is completely present in his life. Moments after I entered his room, he was talking to me about Isaac of Nineveh, the 8th century Syrian hermit whose writings he had been reading when I came in. Like my granddaughter, he too is singing his version of Ring Around the Rosies, dancing until he falls down and turns to ashes. In between that toddler and that old man is a span of over 80 years, and most of us in those intervening decades tangle ourselves up in knots over the things we don't have that we want and the things we have that we don't want. We run around trying to fix things in our personal lives and in the life of the planet. It's a good thing we do because it's actually our responsibility to fix things. We need to fix the plumbing, for example. The toddler and the old monk aren't fixing the plumbing. They need us to take care of them. And we need them, too, to remind us that everything is already taken care of. So, I'm going to finish with one more paragraph, because this is an important idea to me about aging, and it's just a way to think about it. And this is the last part of the introduction. Wabi-sabi is a Japanese expression for the beauty of impermanence and the imperfection of things that are worn and frayed and chipped through use. Objects that are simple and rustic, like an earthenware tea bowl, and objects that show their age, like a wooden banister worn smooth by many hands, are beautiful. I sew patches on my clothes, and I glue broken plates back together. I love mended things. I like to take pictures of old things, the spider web of cracks in the windshield of a truck, bright mildew on the wall of an abandoned railroad station. Teenagers pay good money for shortcuts to Wabi-sabi when they buy designer jeans that are pre-faded, pre-frayed, and pre-ripped. But the true wabi-sabi look can't be made in a factory. It depends on the passage of time. I'm turning wabi-sabi. I study the back of my hand with interest, the blossoming brown spots, the blue veins becoming more prominent. With my other hand, I can slide the skin loosely over the bones. As I get older, I am turning into myself. Job gone, children grown and living far away, parents dead, can't backpack, can't do hip-hop. Who am I really? Now I get to find out. So, thank you. Yes?
What do you think about reincarnation?
I don't know about reincarnation. I could be or could not be. I'm not particularly, I don't know much. I don't think about it much. As a Zen Buddhist, we don't talk a lot about reincarnation in Zen. And different forms of Buddhism really put more emphasis on reincarnation. But I do believe that there's some life stream that continues. But as to being reborn in the body of a cow or something, I don't exactly believe that. Well, I don't know what will happen after I die, but I feel that all of us are like, the metaphor I like about it is like the ocean, and a life is like a wave, but it's made out of the same substance. It's made out of the water of the ocean. It's just an energy formation of the water of the ocean, and when the wave breaks, that life is over, but the water is still there. So that's how I feel about it. Yes?
Yeah, I sometimes think that, at least from my experience, I waver from guilt about the past to anxiety about the future. But there was a wonderful quote from Mark Twain, and he said, "I've been through some terrible things in my life. Many of them actually happened."
That's a wonderful quote.
It is so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what makes you think that you're such a seer, that you can predict what's going to happen tomorrow?
Yeah.
So you may as well focus on what you got.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great quote.
I love
And some of them actually happened. Yeah, we can get ourselves into such a tizzy by worry and also fussing over the past too, and sort of obsessing about it. Yes, Mary.
I was, one of the things that I think about, I loved what you said about getting older and modeling getting older, because my parents both died in their mid-90s, and they were such an inspiration to so many of us. And I think about our generation and younger people who are very techno-savvy, and having to learn from people younger than us, which is a kind of a reversal. And I sometimes try to think if there was ever another time where there was something like that's so important to all of us, that we have to look to our younger people to teach us how to do it, or they're actually better at it. And the teaching in that, in being a student and having somebody younger than you teach you something, and also trying to model to them, you really have to be patient and nice when you're teaching people. You can't say, "I can't believe you don't know that," or, "I told you that already," But anyway, it's just sort of an interesting experience to have younger people teaching you something that is so much a part of our lives, and you're always thinking, "Oh, I'm going to go find a 20-year-old to tell me how to fix this or work this camera," or whatever happens to be. But
that's a great point. I think that is a very interesting phenomenon of our time, that young people know more about that stuff. But another thing that I've noticed that I wanted to say is that I've been surprised how much respect I actually feel from the young people that I've come in contact with. Because when I was young, I don't think I was very respectful of old people. I mean, I wasn't rude, but I think I just thought, "Oh, well, what do they know? They're old." Or, I mean, I feel as though young people are interested in hearing about our lives, and I guess it depends partly on what you project, but I think a dialogue across generations is so valuable, and so it's valuable for us to learn from young people, and that gives them a good feeling, and then it might make them more able to learn from us too about how you don't say I can't believe you don't know that. We have a wisdom that they don't have and judgments that they don't have, and we can help each other tremendously. And we don't want to just talk to other people our same age. Yes.
I remember when I first became a grandmother, I wasn't quite sure. I babysat my grandson. He's 18 now, and I wasn't quite sure what we were going to do. He was about 2.5 or 3, and I used to follow my father around when I was little. So that was my modeling.
Uh-huh.
And he worked in the garden, and he fed the birds, and he talked about the flowers, and I just followed along. And that was what I used first.
Great. And so
Good.
your grandson followed you around as you did your things.
Loved it.
That's a nice story. Yeah, because kids love to do what grown-ups do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm just going to piggyback on what Mary was saying, just relaying a funny incident. I mentioned to a friend of mine who's younger than I am, he just turned 60, and I think he was a lot younger, but we won't go. And I was saying that whenever I park my car, I can never find it. And his response was, there's an app for that.
I didn't know that. Is
Yeah,
that
there
really
is
is?
a
Oh my
feature
God.
saying, you leave your car, you click on this app, and then there's an app.
Wow.
And I said, oh, please.
But what about the learning curve to learn how to use the app? Does it take longer to walk around until you find your car, or to learn? That's kind of great. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Trina.
Invisible.
Oh yes. Well, I experienced that with my hair. When my hair turned gray, I noticed that. I mean, it happened. I didn't know if it was all about that, but I just would notice that when I was waiting in line someplace or in a crowd of people in a crowded store and trying to get attention from somebody behind the counter or something like that, I just was basically invisible. Or people didn't really look me in the eye either. I kind of, and then I caught myself doing the same thing. I realized that I would, if I just saw a sort of gray-haired person that was like some gray cloud kind of passing through or something, and there's some way, we have such a strong social conditioning or something, and I think older women in particular are so marginalized as not really having anything particularly important to say about whatever is the happening thing, that we get used to ignoring them, or we get ignored. But also my mother would talk about that a lot, and so she started I'll tell a little story about her. She started a foundation which was a writers and artists colony, place for writers and artists to work. And she was on the board, and she did this in her 50s. And she, she was quite a visionary, and she did a wonderful thing, and she would meet with people and stuff. And then as she got older, she would tell me that nobody paid any attention to what she said, and the people, the staff and the board members and stuff, they just thought she was this sort of annoying little old lady, and that she was she had a bit of a temper, my mother did, and she just would, and she would get mad, and I would get very embarrassed by her temper, and she'd say, that's the only way they'll pay any attention to me. They'll never pay any attention to me unless I get mad. And so, like, and I have this story in the book, but we were taking a plane flight. I think it might have been the last plane flight she ever took. We had gone to Ireland together, and we were coming back to Chicago, where she lived, and she was using a wheelchair quite a bit of the time, and she'd ordered a wheelchair at the airport to meet her at the, when you get off the plane, and there's that tube, or whatever you call it. So we got off the plane, and there was no wheelchair there, and she was standing, which was somewhat painful for her, and she said, where's my wheelchair? And they said, oh, it's coming, ma'am, it's coming, ma'am. And she stood there for about 30 seconds more, and they said, where's my fucking wheelchair? Where's my fucking wheelchair? I'm never going to go on this fucking airline again. And meantime, I was just cringing and wanting to hide and pretending I didn't know this woman or whatever. And instantly, there was a wheelchair. So that's one way to deal with invisibility. Yes.
Yeah, it happened to me in an Indian restaurant. This young waiter was trying to explain to me what the components of this dish were. And I wanted to say, but I was in India. I don't want to hear this, I just want my food, I don't want you to patronize me. And I find that I'm often, not that I actually often did this to people, was infantilized.
Yes.
But they didn't know, but they knew so much better.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, I actually, that thing that I have never heard anybody talk about is I would see somebody who looked like me, and I would think, they're old, I'm not, and I'm never going to be old. So, like, you're a different, and so I've had a hard time with becoming older. I got a group together, but nobody talked about getting older. They talked about what they were doing, and it was very hard to find a form.
Yeah, it's hard to really dive into that, but it's very fruitful. Yes.
I have never been called sweetie in my life. Now
Doesn't that drive you nuts?
everyone calls me sweetie.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'm not sweetie.
You should tell them that. Yeah, my doctor, my very nice young doctor, recently when I was at the doctor I forget what I was complaining about, but anyway, she was testing my strength or something. Yeah, maybe I was complaining about memory loss, but I've forgotten it. Anyway, she said, well, let me test your strength. And she said, push against my arm or something. So I pushed against her arm, and she said, ooh, I wouldn't want to meet you on a dark street, or get into a fight with you on a dark street. And I just wanted to punch her, even though it wasn't a dark street. I mean, it was so, she thought she was cheering me on, this poor little old lady. Yes?
This seems like a good moment to share my own personal motto for aging.
Yes, let's hear it.
The 3 L's. Keep learning, keep loving, keep laughing.
Excellent. The 3 L's. Thank you for that. Keep learning, keep loving, keep laughing.
Lady isn't approaching anymore.
Oh, good for you. That's great. Gosh, laughing is essential. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Same thing in my head. What do I know? They're just doing this huge study about gratitude, which of course is one of the Buddhist.
Yes.
But if the effects of gratitude, feeling gratitude, have on our health, and when we talk about old friends or we talk about our lives, it's so easy to bitch about the sores and the pains, but the gratitude for the beauty of what we have. It's just a lovely thing that we're actually studying gratitude.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. And to do a gratitude practice in a kind of deliberate way can be helpful too. For a while, and some of you may have done this too, but I had the practice of every night before I went to sleep, I wrote down 3 things I was grateful for from that day. And just it puts you in a different frame of mind.
A friend and I email each other every day with just, can be a little thing.
Oh, what a great
I'm
idea.
glad I have you for a friend to email this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Everybody else I'm grateful for it today because it's really a bitchy day, but every day.
That's great.
Gratitude. Yeah.
That's great.
Totally.
Full. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm interested in what age might liberate us from. And when you were talking about invisibility, I thought, well, there is something liberating about being invisible.
Yes.
That if I think, nobody's going to care what I'm wearing.
Yes.
Or how my hair looks, or any of those things that I spent far too much
Yes.
time worrying about at earlier times in my life.
It's true. I think that can be very liberating, and you're not going to the lack of eroticism can be, I mean, you can think, well, I used to be kind of sexy or something, but that can be a big relief too. Oh, let's drop that, Okay, that's been a concern for a long time in some of our lives, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore. And yeah, but I think also not worrying just about your clothing and it doesn't mean you want to look like a slob or anything, but just just let it be fine and wholesome, and that's all you have to do. Yes.
I have a friend on Facebook who recently lost her sister, and it was her sister was a twin, and 2 years ago her other twin died.
Oh.
She started doing a gratitude practice on Facebook, and it made everybody feel good.
Oh.
The comments she would get when she would say, "Oh, the sunset was beautiful tonight," we all felt great just reading her posts. So she spread her own gratitude.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, it's very contagious, gratitude. Yeah. Yes?
I mentioned reincarnation. I do not believe that it's a reward or anything. I think that my belief is that the soul comes here to learn. And if you ain't learned it this time, you're going to have to come back and learn it next time.
Well, that could well be, and also I think that's true within this life. I notice life keeps teaching you the same lesson until you learn it. Kind of, somebody said that to me. That can be true too. Yes.
I noticed that one of the things, or the themes in your book, was aloneness and dealing with it. And from reading your book, and I relate to the aloneness part, it sounds like a journey, and it sounds like you ended up in a good place. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Well, I think, I don't know that I've ended up, I'm still on that journey, and sometimes I'm not married. I was divorced long ago, and I've had relationships since, but I never remarried, and I've been single a lot of the time, and sometimes it's been harder than other times, and that has gotten easier lately because of gratitude and because of the tremendous amount of, I'm so grateful for my friends and family, and I have a community, and at this point, maybe it would still be wonderful to have a partner, but I have more, I feel more whole in myself and maybe it's because I don't expect it anymore, exactly, but I also know that, I have had that in my life. I had a partner, I've been in love, I've had those parts of my life, and I'm very grateful for that. But if I were to marry now, I might immediately, or find a partner now, I might somebody would get sick and old really soon, or who knows, I might spend the whole relationship taking care of giving somebody his medication or something, which, I vow to be with you till death do us part. Well, in sickness and in health. Well, that, I don't know. My mother married a second time quite late in her life, and her husband my stepfather was 72, I think, when she married him, and he wasn't terribly healthy, and she did spend a lot of time, and it was difficult, and she married him, he was a very nice man, but I think she kind of wished sometimes that she hadn't married him because she really was very lonely before she married him, but she didn't take a lot of time to see how it might be to be on her own, and she did do a lot of caretaking, and that was hard. But anyway, maybe it was for the best that she did marry him. He was a good person, but you never know. You just don't know what's going to happen. So, right now I just feel so grateful for friends, really, and my women friends are. They're not all women, men friends too. That it just goes a really long. They can be very intimate friendships, So, I think we're just about ready to end.
Well, we'd like to give you a certificate.
Oh my goodness! Thank you very much. So, and I do have books in the back there if anybody wants a book. So, thank you.